What's up, y'all? I'm Chief Ron, better known as Prez the Investor. You're now investing with Prez. Do me a favor, hype the video, hit the like button, and if you're not currently subscribed, click on that one too, and the bell icon. So boom, I'm on TikTok going through my notifications, and I noticed somebody liked one of my videos, right? Now, usually, I don't pay attention to that type of shit for real, but the profile picture instantly triggers something in my head. Because I know I've seen that avatar before. Not on TikTok either. Inside the whole Miss Vivian Green XRP atmosphere. So, now I'm curious. I click on the page, and who the hell did I see? Motherfucking Braun Strowman. The monster of all monsters. So, now at this point, my brain already in investigation mode because I've been studying all of these overlapping crypto narratives, repost channels, urgency speeches, protect your asset videos, these private Telegram groups, all of this, the banks are coming energy. So little details start stretching out to me automatically now. So I leave TikTok and I head straight over to YouTube. Type the name in. Boom. Channel pop right up. Established in 2017. Okay, cool. That feel legit to me. But I keep scrolling anyway because something ain't sitting right in my spirit. And then I see another account recently created using Braun Strowman's actual profile picture. Now slow down because now I'm trying to figure out what exactly the fuck am I looking at. So I keep scrolling some more. And I go Vivian Yellow. Using the same exact damn avatar that I just saw connected to motherfucking Braun Strowman. At this point, I'm sitting there staring at my phone like, hold on, yo. What the fuck is going on here? Because now I'm seeing overlapping profile pictures, recently created channels, XRP style branding, reposted content, WhatsApp information, and crypto urgency language all mixed together in one search result. Y'all want to know what I did next? I sent Braun Strowman a message directly via TikTok. I said, are you aware somebody is impersonating you on YouTube currently? That man hit me back almost immediately. No, I am not. And right there, that's when I knew I might have accidentally stumbled onto some whole nother layer of this ecosystem. Now, that incident happened about 2 weeks ago. And I decided to not bring it up right away because I didn't want to make it seem like I'm just coming with gossip or drama or anything like that. I wanted to make sure that I exactly had a lesson to go along with this information. So I get a notification from Miss Vivian Green. Now, normally, I would have just watched the video and kept it moving. It's like I'm lying. But anyway, before I even press play, I happened to look down at the description, and that's when something caught my attention because the description starts off by saying, over the last 30 days, the XRP ledger took in roughly $1.5 billion in net real-world asset inflows. Then it says in the same exact window, Ethereum lost approximately $1.2 billion as those assets left the chain. Then it goes on to say the actual tokenized financial paper of the real economy is migrating from one settlement layer to another in real time. And when I read that, I said, man, hold the fuck up. And the reason I say hold the fuck up is because I noticed something that I see all of the time in investing, crypto, stocks, damn near every financial conversation you could think of. The first statement sounded like a data point. The second statement sounded like a data point. But that third statement sounded like a motherfucking conclusion. See, saying money moved into the XRP ledger is one thing. Saying money left Ethereum is another thing. But saying the financial paper of the real economy is migrating from one settlement layer to another in real time. See, now we have stepped into a completely different conversation. And before we start talking about what this means, I want to make sure we understand what exactly is being claimed first. Because if we're being precise here, there are actually 3 separate ideas packed into those few sentences. Idea number 1, money moved into the XRP ledger. Idea number 2, money left Ethereum. Idea number 3, the real economy is migrating from one settlement layer to another. Now, whether you agree with XRP, disagree with XRP, own it or don't own it, that's not even the point right now. Pay attention. The point is, those are not the same claim. Because one of them is talking about money moving. The other one is talking about what that movement supposedly means. And that's where my brain immediately starts asking questions. Questions like, okay, who the fuck moved the money? And why did they move the money? Was it one institution, 10 institutions, one product, multiple products, a test, permanent, temporary? Was it because the XRP ledger was better? Or was it because Ethereum was more expensive? I ain't done. Was it because regulation, speed, or cost? Because if we're going to make the jump from money moving to the real economy migrating, I need to understand everything sitting in the middle first. Because here's the thing. The first 2 statements might be completely accurate. Money may have moved into the XRP ledger and money may have left Ethereum. I ain't arguing with neither one of those statements right now. What I'm trying to figure out is whether those facts automatically lead to the conclusion that's been presented, because those are 2 completely different exercises. One is measuring what happened, the other one is explaining what happened, and those ain't always the same thing. Matter of fact, let me give you an example. If I walk outside right now and I see 20 cars parked in front of a restaurant, that's a fact. The cars are there. But if I immediately say, damn, this must be the best restaurant in town. See, now I'm making an interpretation. Maybe the food is amazing. Maybe it's not even worth feeding to my fucking dog. What if it's a wedding going on? Or the parking lot next door is closed? Maybe somebody having a swinger party. I don't know yet. All I know for a fact is that the cars are there. Everything after that requires more investigation. And that's why I hit my brakes when I got to that third statement, because moving assets from point A to point B is one thing. Claiming that the real economy is migrating is something else entirely. Those 2 statements might end up leading to the same destination. Shit, they may not. But I'm not willing to skip over all of the questions in the middle and just automatically assume we already know the answer. Because if I'm being honest, that's how a lot of people end up getting themselves in trouble in the first place. They see a fact, then they attach a story to the fact. Then after hearing the story enough times, they start treating the story like it's a fact too. And that's really the lesson I wanted to pull out of this before we even get into the video itself. Because whether we're talking about XRP, Bitcoin, quantum stocks, AI, real estate, or anything else, your job as an investor ain't to immediately fall in love with the explanation. Your job is to first determine what you actually know, what can be verified, measured, and proven. Then after that, we can start having a conversation about what it might mean, because if you reverse that process, you can end up becoming emotionally attached to a conclusion before you even finish examining the evidence. So after breaking down that video description, I realized I was irritated. So I backed out and I started fresh. And once I backed out, that's when I finally looked at the thumbnail and title. Because at that point, I figured if I'm going to restart, I might as well restart from the actual beginning. So I look at the thumbnail. Ethereum on one side, XRP on the other. Red arrows, green arrows. XRP ledger wins. Then I look at the title. The money is leaving Ethereum for XRP. Here's proof. And immediately my attention goes to those last 3 words. The proof. Because now I'm curious. Because if we talking about proof, then somewhere in this video, there should be a bridge connecting the information to the conclusion. So at that point, I press play. And right out the gate, she started talking about capital migration. Not price, charts, candles, or moon missions. Capital migration. Specifically, money allegedly moving from Ethereum over to the XRP ledger. And I gotta be honest, I actually like this part, because whether I end up agreeing with the conclusion or not, at least we talking about something measurable, something we can look at, and something beyond trust me bro XRP to 100K by Tuesday. Then she starts getting into real world asset tokenization. And before I go any further, I actually want to give credit where credit is due, because a lot of people throw around the term real world assets and tokenization without ever slowing down long enough to explain what the fuck they even talking about. She actually took time to explain it. Basically, taking traditional financial assets and putting them on blockchain rails so they can move, settle, and be tracked digitally. Now, whether you agree with the investment theses attached to it is a separate conversation, but the explanation itself, fair enough. Plus, she looked nice, but that's neither here nor there. So, right when I'm settling in and listening, that's when shit got funny. So, I'm settling in. We talking about capital migration, tokenized assets, and settlement rails. She actually explaining to me what the hell she talking about. And then, out of nowhere, I get slapped upside the head with a goddamn infomercial. Now, before anybody start reaching, let me be clear. She done talked about the crypto Roth IRA before. She done used music before. Neither one of those things are new. But for whatever reason, this particular moment caught me completely off guard. And I ain't even gonna lie to y'all. At this point, I'm on a whole emotional roller coaster. I'm trying to follow the XRP argument, and I'm trying to figure out if that's the instrumental for it's time for the percolator playing in the background. And I don't know if y'all noticed or not, but I used to be a motherfucking party boy. So I'm over here trying not to dance, which ain't even work by the way, while simultaneously trying to figure out what's exactly being sold. Meanwhile, she talking about 15 investors, exclusive access, join the wait list, first link in the description. So I'm sitting there like, damn, we got from tokenized treasuries to this shit kind of fast. I mean, like, just whip it out. I don't even get a chance to take a shower first. Anyway, once the commercial was over, she got right back to the actual argument. And this is where things start getting interesting again, because now she's talking about BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, asset managers, broker-dealers, tokenized treasuries, actual institutions. And the argument she's making is basically this. Stop looking at XRP and Ethereum like two crypto projects fighting each other. Kind of like how we going to be doing if y'all don't hurry up and hit that like button, because I already know a couple of y'all probably forgot. But in other words, two different rails. And the question becomes, which rail are institutions choosing to build on? Now, I got to be honest. I actually think that's a much stronger argument than XRP to the moon, or trust me, bro, or the price action going to be $1 gazillion by next Tuesday. Because at least now we talking about usage, adoption, and whether institutions are actually putting real money and real products on these networks. But this is where my question started coming in at, because I kept hearing the word migration. 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 And now I'm sitting there wondering, okay, exactly how much migration are we talking about? Because moving assets from point A to point B is one thing. Claiming that the regulated financial system is migrating is something else entirely. And I need y'all to pay attention to that distinction, because those two statements sound similar, but they ain't necessarily the same thing. One is describing something that happened. The other is describing what we think it might mean. And that's where my brain started slowing down. Because here's where my question started coming in at. The title says, the money is leaving Ethereum for XRP. Here's proof. Okay, fair enough. Show me the goddamn proof. But what I started noticing was that every time we move one step forward, the conclusions seem to move 3 steps forward. Money move, therefore migration. Migration, therefore infrastructure shift. Infrastructure shift, therefore regulated financial system is choosing a winner. And I'm sitting there like, hold on, slow down. Walk me across the bridge, because I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I want to see every step. I don't want to start at point A and wake up at point Z. I want to know what happened to B, C, D, E, F, motherfucking G, and all the other motherfucking letters in between. Because if the conclusion is true, it should be able to survive the walk. it shouldn't need me to skip half the journey just to get there. And that's the point where I stopped looking at XRP, I stopped looking at Ethereum, and I started looking at the argument itself. And then she started stacking institutional names. JP Morgan, MasterCard, Ripple, Schwab, trust banks, brokerages, prime brokerage access. And don't get me wrong, I understand why she's bringing them up. Because if you're making the argument that somebody is becoming part of financial infrastructure, then obviously institutions matter. Fair enough. But this is where I started slowing down again, because sometimes a grocery list of names can accidentally create the illusion that an argument has been proven, when really all we have established is that a lot of names were mentioned. And those ain't necessarily the same thing. So now I'm sitting there trying to separate what's connected, what's related, what's relevant, and what's being grouped together, because it sounds good when you hear it all in one sentence. Because the more names that got added to that pile, the more I found myself asking the same question. Okay, what exactly are we proving? Are we proving that institutions are paying attention? Are we proving that tokenization is growing? Are we proving that XRP is benefiting? Or are we proving that the regulated financial system has already chosen a winner? Because those are 4 different conclusions. And I kept finding myself trying to figure out which one we was actually talking about. And then we get to the part where she started talking about the first tens of billions choosing the rail. And if the first tens of billions choose the rail, then the hundreds of trillions that come later are going to follow the same rail. Now I want y'all to pay attention to something, because this is where we start moving from observation into projection. And there ain't nothing wrong with projections. Every investor on earth make projections. Shit, if you buy a stock today, you making a projection. If you buy a house today, you making a projection. If you buy XRP today, you making a projection. So the issue ain't the projection. The issue is making sure we don't accidentally start treating the projection like the fuck it already happened. Because the first part of the argument is, here's what we're seeing. The second part of the argument is, here's what we think it could lead to. And those are 2 completely different conversations. So I'm sitting there listening and thinking, okay, I can follow the first part. I can see why somebody would arrive at the second part. But I don't want to accidentally blend the 2 together and start acting like they the same fucking thing. Because one is evidence, the other is expectation. One is observation, and the other is prediction. And if you mix those 2 together, you can end up feeling a lot more certain than the actual evidence justifies. And then we get to what I personally think was the biggest pivot in the entire motherfucking video. Because up until this point, we've been talking about migration, infrastructure, tokenization, institutions, settlement rails. Then all of a sudden, the conversation shifts to, do you own XRP correctly? And that's when my ears perk up, because now we ain't talking about whether migration is happening. We talking about you, me, portfolio structure. And I remember sitting there thinking, hold the fuck up. We just changed conversations. Not necessarily in a bad way, but we definitely changed conversations. Because whether XRP is benefiting from tokenization is one thing. Whether I own XRP correctly is a completely different question. And whether a Roth IRA is better than a taxable account is a whole nother thing. And whether the crypto Roth IRA is the best place to hold it is another question on top of that. So now I'm sitting there trying to keep all these conversations separated in my head. Because now we talking about protecting gains, Roth IRAs, tax structures, keeping more of what you make. And on the surface, ain't nothing wrong with that conversation. Shit, it's actually an important conversation. But this is where I started getting confused, because at one point, she basically talking about people giving up 30 to 40%. And I'm sitting there like, hold on for a minute. We need to slow the fuck down, because now we talking taxes, and taxes ain't one size fit all. How long did you hold it? What's your income? What state do you live in? Is it short term or long term? Because those details matter. And that's why I kept saying to myself, hold the fuck up. we got another conversation happening, because whether XRP benefits from tokenization is one question. Whether a Roth IRA has advantages is another question. And whether somebody is automatically giving up 30 to 40% is a complete different story. And if I ain't careful, all three of those conversations are going to get blended together into one giant conclusion. So now I'm sitting here trying to separate the migration argument from the tax argument, from the crypto IRA argument, because I don't want to accidentally walk out the room thinking one of those things proved the other two, when really there are three separate discussions happening at the same goddamn time. And then we finally arrive at the part of the video that my irritated ass already knew was definitely coming. Not because I got a crystal ball or that I'm psychic or anything, but because I done watched enough of this content to recognize the pattern. And that's when we get into the crypto Roth IRA, the funding bonus, the phone calls, the community, the coaching, the links. And now I'm sitting there asking myself a question. How exactly did we get here? Because remember where we started? We started with money allegedly moving from Ethereum to XRP. Then we started talking about tokenized assets. Then settlement rails, institutions, migrations, infrastructure, tax structures. And now we standing in front of a $797 phone call and a $1,497 trauma bond while we hold a fucking bad community. And don't get me wrong, I ain't saying there's anything wrong with selling a product or service. Shit, I'm on YouTube too. My question is much simpler than that. What does all of this have to do with the original motherfucking claim? Because that's the question I kept finding myself coming back to. Not whether the phone call, community, or crypto Roth IRA exists. I want to know, what the fuck does any of that have to do with the money is leaving Ethereum for XRP? Here's the proof. Because that's the train that I got on. And somewhere along the way, I found myself standing in front of a whole different station. And then we get to the close of the video. And this is where she started talking about being prepared, position, being on the winning side, and what she calls the greatest wealth transfer of our lifetime. Now, I know some of y'all probably expecting me to start throwing chairs across the room. But honestly, that ain't even the part I was focused on. Because whether it's XRP, AI, quantum computing, real estate, Bitcoin, gold, I've heard some version of that same statement more times than I can count. The greatest wealth transfer, the greatest opportunity, the chance of a lifetime, the opportunity of a generation. The wording changes, the asset changes, the vehicle changes, but the emotional pull stays the same. And that's what I found myself paying attention to. Not whether XRP can go up, tokenization can grow, or whether institutions are paying attention. The part I was paying attention to was how much of this argument is based on what we know and how much of it is based on what we think all of it is eventually headed. Because if I'm being honest, by the end of the video, I wasn't even debating XRP no more. I was debating certainty. Because the more certain somebody sounds about the future, the more I find myself wanting to slow down and examine how the fuck they got there. So now, let's talk about these comments for a minute, because sometimes the comments tell you just as much as the video. Not always, but sometimes. And the first thing that jumped out at me wasn't even the people agreeing or disagreeing. It was the damn impersonation accounts. Because if you look through the comments, right, you'll see this account responding to people pretending to be the creator. Same name, similar profile, but it's a different account. And they telling people to contact them, message them, reach out to them. And every time I see that shit, I just shake my head, because the creator didn't post that shit. The creator didn't even respond to that shit. That's somebody trying to catch somebody slipping. Pay attention. And the crazy part is, if you're brand new to the channel, you might not even know the difference. So before we even get into what the audience saying, I got to point that shit out first. Because if you don't know what you're looking at, you can end up having a conversation with a scammer thinking you talking to the actual content creator. And unfortunately, that ain't exactly rare on YouTube these days. Now, as far as the actual comments are concerned, something else started jumping out at me, and it wasn't really people arguing, fighting, or disagreeing. What I kept noticing was everybody seemed to be locking onto a different part of the video. Some people was focused on XRP. Some people was focused on Ethereum. Some people was focused on tokenization. Then you had other people focused on taxes. And then the rest of the people was focused on the crypto Roth IRA. But hold up. Some people was focused on the idea that institutions were supposedly choosing a winner. And as I was reading through all of this shit, I started realizing something. Depending on which part of the video grabbed your attention the most, right? You could walk away with a completely different conclusion. Think about it. If you already bullish on XRP, you probably heard confirmation. If you're interested in taxes, you probably heard Roth IRA. If you're interested in tokenization, you probably heard infrastructure. If you're interested in institutional adoption, you probably heard JP Morgan, BlackRock, and MasterCard. And that's what I found interesting, but because by the time I got done reading the comments, I wasn't just looking at the video anymore. I was looking at how different people filtered the same exact information through different lenses. And honestly, that's probably the most interesting part of the entire damn thing. And I think that's really the lesson I took away from all of this. Not whether XRP or Ethereum wins, not whether tokenization grows, or whether the crypto Roth IRA is a good idea. The lesson is learning how to separate what you know from what you believe. Because if you ain't careful, those two things can start looking exactly the same. We know money moves. Institutions are experimenting with tokenization, and financial products are being placed on blockchain rails. We know all of that shit. Then after that comes the part where we start asking, what does it mean? What happens next? Who benefits? Which network wins? Which asset wins? And it ain't nothing wrong with asking those questions. That's what the fuck investors do. The problem starts when we stop treating those questions like questions and start treating them like answers. Because once that happens, you can accidentally become emotionally attached to a conclusion before you even finish examining the evidence. And that's exactly what I found myself thinking about through this entire video. Not whether somebody was right or wrong, just making sure that I understood the difference between here's what happened and here's what we think it might lead to. Because if you can learn to separate those two things, you're already ahead of most people participating in the conversation. So at the end of the day, whether you agree with Miss Vivian Green or you disagree with Miss Vivian Yellow, that ain't really the point. The point is learning how to think your way through the information. Because if you can do that, it don't matter whether we talking about XRP, Bitcoin, AI, quantum computing, real estate, gold, silver, or the next hot thing that's supposed to make all of us rich by next Thursday. You're going to be able to examine the claim for yourself. Separate the evidence from expectations, the observations from the projections, and most importantly, you're going to be able to understand why you believe what the fuck you believe. Because if you don't understand why you invested, somebody else will always be standing by, ready to sell you conviction. And once somebody else is responsible for your conviction, they also responsible for your doubt. And that's a dangerous place to be. So if you want to learn how to think for yourself when it comes to stocks and crypto, like, subscribe, and learn here for free 99. Fuck them classes. Keep your money. Because once you start thinking for yourself, that whole story falls apart.